Welcome back to Developing the Leader Within podcast, as we address leadership from different angles to bring you what you need to know how to succeed. Today, I have with me Tracy Sinclair. Tracy is a specialist in the field of coaching and has been recognized as one of the leading global coach winners of Thinkers 50 Marshall Goldsmith Coaching Awards of 2019 and 2021. And she has served as vice chair, International Coaching Federation Global Board, and the co-author of Becoming a Coach, the Essential ICF Guide. Tracy, welcome to the show. So glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Today, we're going to be talking about leadership and people / interpersonal skills. And before we get into the meat and the nitty gritty of that topic, tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I guess I've had a bit of a variety of experiences professionally, particularly in my life. As we were just talking about, my first career was as a linguist, actually, teaching, translating and interpreting in Spanish. I lived in Spain for a number of years and have had some wonderful trips trekking around Latin America, Central and South America. More for pleasure than for business. And then I moved into international banking when I came back to the UK, which kind of led me into operational leadership, as we're talking about leadership. And interestingly, one of the experiences that I had there was that leadership and particularly change management and change programs that I got very involved in seemed to be more focused on processes and systems than the people. And that the people change was kind of the last thing that was considered, and the people had to just fit into the changes that were happening. So my business evolved from there. I left corporate life, set up a leadership development company, which I've had for a number of years. And then when I discovered coaching in 2005, I thought, wow, this is a really fascinating way of not just working with people as a practitioner, but as a way of leading and communicating. So my business sort of specialized a little bit after that. Well, not a little bit, a lot. And now I work pretty much exclusively in the field of coaching and its various applications.
Now, I love that. And I was amazed. You spoke to me in Spanish. I was like, wow, she knows Spanish. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Your background in education, it was centered around Spanish. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I was at school, we had the option to learn languages, and it was probably a very unintelligent choice in a way, although a good choice in the end. But we had a choice of choosing German or Spanish to learn, and the queue in the classroom for people wanting to learn German was very long, and the queue of people wanting to learn Spanish was very short. And I thought, well, I want to be different. Spanish sounds much more interesting to me than German. And I thought, well, there's probably more people in the world that speak Spanish than speak German. And my grandmother was Spanish. So I thought, well, hey, let's go down that route. And it was wonderful. I absolutely adored the language and the Spanish and Latin American culture. Maybe there's just a little bit of that hanging around in my DNA. So yeah, that was my degree. And of course, that took me to an overseas placement. And then the next 8 years were history, really, because I was teaching and translating. Had a very, very fascinating job, actually. My last job in Spain was in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. And in the Canary Islands, they have a very world significant astrophysics laboratory up in the mountains. It's because they're volcanic. And I had a job as a translator for the astrophysicists, which made for quite interesting vocabulary to actually, be able to communicate in their language. But it was really interesting. Really, I loved that time of my life.
Well, that's such a fascinating fact and aspect of you, because the reason why I bring it up is that a lot of people negate exploration of other cultures and other languages. And in our multicultural world, you know, when it used to be that you would travel by ships, then it would take a long time. And I would see why not so much people moved around and they were located. But now you could actually be I'm in the UK right now, right? And so
Okay.
travel, it's taken many modes. But what I bring it is because we're talking about people and we're talking about interpersonal skills. And you have just put, it's in your resume, it's in your trajectory, your career, and you have made it so that now you can cross borders that most people cannot, because you explored this area of life of multicultural skills in the line of leadership. Why is it important for leaders to explore different areas where they can now treat other people?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating area, and it's interesting that you use this term of crossing borders, because if we can't cross that border, it becomes a barrier. It moves from a border to a barrier. And of course, there are borders and boundaries. And in coaching, we talk a lot about different kinds of boundaries that help the coaching relationship to be safe and appropriate and all of those things. But a border is something that just marks a difference, isn't it? There's something that's on one side that maybe is slightly different for whatever reason than the other side. But if we can't traverse those things and navigate them effectively and fluidly and honor the differences, but at the same time have a fluid exchange between them, then that border is a barrier. And for me, I would have thought philosophically, that's a fundamental significance in leadership. If we can't cross those borders and be inclusive of those things, and whether that's the obvious of cultural differences, which is a primary thought, I guess, around borders and difference and things like that, but it could be all sorts of different borders, just even different styles or perspectives of how to lead or how to approach certain strategic goals in an organization. So I think if we can't traverse those boundaries, those borders, then our thinking and our territory becomes very limited, very defined. And I would think that a leader's success is then limited and defined to a particular niche area. And in today's world, that I believe could be a disadvantage, because not only, as you've just said, you're partly in the UK and I'm partly in the US with you. We need to have that trajectory between us. We need to have that fluidity between us.
I absolutely love that. Now, leaders, and before we started the episode, I told you about a leader that told me straight out, "Hey, I don't like people." And I say, "Why are you here? Right? How can you be here if you don't like or love people?" So, why is the love of people so central to the success of a leader?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental question, isn't it? I guess because maybe it depends what kind of leadership you want to bring. You could have a very authoritarian, directive style of leadership that relies on compliance rather than commitment. So one could argue, if one subscribes to that model of leadership, that maybe you could lead effectively without liking people, because you just tell them what to do and expect them to follow. But I guess what that implies is, maybe some characteristics of that kind of leadership that are perhaps limiting or not so helpful. You know, if we've got high levels of compliance, do we have the same high levels of commitment and engagement and belief and genuine motivation? So I think I think for a leader to not like people has got to be a huge barrier. You're going back to barriers. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that every leader has to be the most gregarious, charismatic person on the planet, because we're all different. We all have our strengths and our you know, things that we're less comfortable with, etc. But leadership for me is not something that you can do to people. You have to take the people with you, don't you? So it's a little bit like in coaching when we say you can't do coaching to someone. You can't coach someone to make them do something that you want them to do. They've got to want to do it. What's that analogy of taking a horse to water, but you can't make it drink? And so I think if you don't like people to some extent or can't engage effectively with people, then that's got to limit the scope of your leadership influence, and I would say has a great bearing on the kind of culture perhaps that leaders create, because of course culture is nurtured conversation by conversation, action by action, isn't it, in an organization? And so if you've got leadership that is not people friendly, let's say, that's going to make for a certain kind of culture.
Absolutely. Now, you know, you bring up a good point. We're all different. And so you have to know what you're strong at and what you are not so strong at, and kind of develop a team around that so that you can still be effective regardless of what your, you know, your borders may be, your barriers may be, because at the end of the day, the success of the company is what everybody's trying to, you know, to rally around, or the success of a person, depending on what you're trying to achieve. Now, in, you know, loving people or liking people, that's one thing, but there still requires, leaders still require some level of interpersonal skills. So what aspect of interpersonal skills have you seen in your career that are more blatant, more out there, that you say, oh, a leader should have at least this level of interpersonal skills in order to be successful?
Mm. Yeah, you know, there's probably several things, but one of the things that immediately came to my mind when you said that is it sounds maybe a bit obvious, but really good listening skills. One of the things I've noticed in teaching in coach training, for example, which I have a lot of managers and leaders now coming through coach training, is that they think that at the beginning that they're good listeners. And then when we've actually done some work on deeper listening, more holistic listening, really broadening the context of what you're listening to and listening for, many people respond and say, gosh, I hadn't realized how much I don't listen. I mean, that's quite a common reaction that I hear. In fact, one leader just 2 weeks ago when I was running a program, she came back the next day and said she was out with her family for a meal and she thought that her family were really close and connected with each other and they really listened to each other. And she sat back and she said, I just more observed the conversation. She said, and what I thought was lots of listening was actually lots of talking. Is that people don't really listen to each other, they just talk a lot. And so I think one of the roles of a leader is to offer a sense of direction, to offer guidance, to offer strategies, processes, pathways towards vision. But at the same time, listening to other people, deeply listening to them, to their concerns, to their wants, their needs, their skills, their aspirations, etc., has got to be critical, surely, to taking them with you rather than it being just that one-way dialogue. And I think that deep listening skills is probably one of the most fundamental skills that, you know, any of us, regardless of what leadership roles we have, we could probably always improve on those. It's a natural instinct, isn't it, that our own ego wants to come in to a conversation. It's so easy for us to want to make a conversation about us in some way. And so I think deep listening skills would be my number one.
I absolutely concur with that. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was having a conversation with my wife, and she says, "I know when you're listening, when you're listening, and when you're looking past me." I said, "Oh wow." I said, "Okay, well, that is definitely something I got to work on because I am a huge, supporter of active and intentional listening. It's obvious that even those that support and teach is sometimes a challenge with that. So I absolutely love that you brought that up as your number one. It's close to my number one as well. And so you mentioned coaching, and you've been doing coaching for quite a while. You are involved in the ICF, an organization that I love and hope to be part of one day. We'll talk about that afterwards. And so, how can coaching help leaders in the area of people and interpersonal skills? Because I know a lot of leaders that shy away from coaching, getting coaching.
Mm, mm. Well, I mean, I think you've just lastly there, you've said the primary thing is having coaching themselves. I think coaching skills for managers and leaders is now the fastest growing aspect of coaching as a profession, because it's being, fundamentally recognized, I guess, that at an organizational level, it's not just about having professional coaches coming in, swooping in, doing some coaching and coming out again, although of course that is a very valuable thing to do as well. But the real systemic change and the leverage of coaching as a way of communicating and developing people, if it's going to really become systemic, it's got to be from the managers and leaders who have the biggest impact, across the organization. And I think that the ones that sort of get it, if you like, more effectively are those who have been coached and have therefore had a good experience themselves of the benefit and the value that kind of engagement has had for them, because then they are, I guess, we're preaching to the converted, if you like, rather than just telling leaders that they ought to have these skills, because again, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So just telling an organization's leaders that they ought to have these skills isn't necessarily the best way to get everybody engaged. So actually experience coaching is probably one of the best things. And of course, I think that's why we see now that many leadership programs include coaching as a plug-in almost to in between modules or alongside a program, whether it's one-to-one or group or team coaching, so that there is an exposure to this. And I think some of it also is perhaps that it's just a less developed muscle. I think perhaps, and maybe with what's been going on in the world in the last few years, it's starting to challenge the definition of leadership almost as a concept in the world, with many things that have happened. But one of the traditional paradigms, if you like, of a leader is that they're in charge, they know more or better than everybody else, and they need to own the responsibility of taking things somewhere, and I'm very overgeneralizing there, of course, but that's not enough now, is it? We have to have those interpersonal skills, those elicitation skills to actually take people with us. I mean, just as an example, and I'm sure there are many more, we talk now about the, you know, it's a candidates market in a way, in that things such as the pandemic has led so many people to rethink their lives, and a lot of organizations are reporting losing a lot of talent. I think that term, the Great Resignation, is one that's, you know, quite a widespread concept, and there's a lot of talent for varying reasons that's falling out of organizations. And I know here, at least in the UK and in Europe, it's a candidates market. You know, if you can't keep someone in your organization, it's often because they've got quite a few other jobs they could go to right now. And so as a leader, we've got to bring more than just a compelling vision and a direction. We've got to do more to keep those people on board, I think. And that's where these engagements and coaching as a way of communicating with people is perceived to be one that leads to much higher levels of engagement and motivation. And that's what we need.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned this period of time where, you know, it's just not good enough to be what you used to be 2.5 years ago, right? In the leadership world, things have evolved so much, and requirements. And it's funny because I don't think that the requirements that are being put on leaders today are any different than what was ever expected of leaders. It's just that now there's you either prove it or you're out almost mentality. And it's funny because, you know, on LinkedIn, I was asked, you know, why are you in leadership development? And I couldn't think of anything other than to say, because doing well as a leader, it's not good enough anymore, you know, and it's just that the demand, um, the blindfolds have been taken off people's eyes because of the world situation, that they've realized something that they have negated in the past is that they have a choice. And
Yeah,
leadership is always about choice, and not from the leader's side. It's from
yeah.
the follower's side. You get to choose who you allow to be your leader. And so that's why I am such a supporter of coaching for leaders to help them develop. And I love it because sometimes it happens in the backstage and nobody knows about it. And truly nobody needs to know that you're getting coached and developed in these areas. And you've done it for so long. You even got into writing a book. And so that I want to bring up the book now, because I think it's just a phenomenal companion to the journey of the ICF. And so let's talk a little bit about becoming a coach, the essential ICF guide, and what drew you to actually write it.
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, the ICF has done a big piece of work in the last couple of years to produce an updated and refreshed competency framework. It's something that's done periodically, but particularly timely at the moment, because as we're describing, not only is the world changing a lot and leadership therefore is changing a lot, it means that coaching is also still organically evolving. And so this updated competency model, one of the things I have found as a mentor of coaches, a supervisor or a trainer of coaches, is really helping people to truly understand what the competencies mean, rather than just being words on a piece of paper that tell them what they're supposed to do, you know, which feels very one-dimensional to me. And, you know, worst case scenario could lead to us being very formulaic almost as coaches, where we're just following, you know, a certain set of to-dos almost. And I just am fascinated by how and why these competencies work. Why are they pulled together in that way? And what is it about those skills that make coaching effective? And so that's always been an interest of mine to understand some of the coaching psychology or the performance psychology, the sports psychology, the various disciplines, therapeutic psychology almost, that have fed into that is a real interest to me. And so I enjoy helping to bring those competencies to life, because I know it really helped me to understand why I'm trying to do something, why this kind of intervention or this kind of question works, if you like. So that was one of a key motivator for me. And so when Jonathan Passmore, my co-author, invited me to take that part on, I said yes immediately. There were times when I possibly regretted the decision, when I spent hundreds of hours poring over it. As anyone who's ever written a book will know, it can be a labour of love. But that was what compelled me to get involved in that. And the book was produced, and really, really appreciative that it's been well received. So
Yeah, I am absolutely getting me a copy of that. And I already told you I'm a ICF supporter of what they do. I coach on my end through the Maxwell system. And so I understand the severity and the necessity of a coaching platform for leaders, leadership development, and just a person on their journey in life could always use a coach. And so I'm so happy that not only are you or you have served as head of such of an organization, but you've endeavored to write a book that we can now clearly read and just really understand the whys behind it. There's always leaders, and now more employees and team members that are all after the why, right? And that's why there has been such a departure of a lot of employment, because they've realized that their whys are not being met. And
yeah.
so now they've endeavored to go somewhere else. So if you could tell a leader, one thing or something in terms of the importance of getting coaching, the importance of developing in people skills and interpersonal skills, what would that be?
I think that why coaching, then, that question of why coaching links into how we frame coaching, because in some organizations, for some leaders, coaching can still be perceived as some kind of remedial activity, that I'm getting coached because I'm not good enough at my job. And of course, coaching can help to support the closure of performance gaps, but fundamentally, coaching is about being at our best. It's about tapping into our fullest potential. Why do great sports athletes get a coach? Because they're good at what they do. Yeah, it's the elite that get the coach, kind of thing. And so in coaching, in this world of coaching, we think, well, all human beings can be elite. We're all unique. We've all got our potential. And so the why for me would be that working with a coach will help you to learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is what's really needed in today's world. We know that the way we've done things before, like Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, we know that there are fundamental things around how we lead, how we respond, how we think, that needs to change. And one of even if you go to something like Charles Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, the human beings survive because we can evolve, because we change and adapt and evolve. And I think there's a real challenge for leaders and leadership now to evolve. And I believe that coaching is a wonderful way to help us do that, because it helps us reflect, it helps us tap into other ways of thinking, other strategies. It presumes that we are not limited to the boundaries of our own habitual ways of doing things. It presumes that we are very creative and we can find other strategies, other ways to lead in this instance. And there are many coaches having coaching and bringing coaching skills into their teams who are experiencing that to be true. So I would, you know, I guess in my terms, I would say it's a no-brainer. You know, why not? Why not? If that opportunity could give you that time to reflect, to consider how you're leading, how you're responding, how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and is that optimal for you? Is that getting you where you want to be or not? And if not, what else could you do? It's a great
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yes, I totally agree. And I encourage any leader or any individual listening right now to explore the possibilities of that come through coaching. You will, you know, we say preaching to the choir, those that have can tell you. And if you want to know, look at those people and talk to them and see what happens through that process for them, so that you can make a good decision. But I tell you that in my life, the biggest leaps and bounds have come through the process of coaching, getting coached, having that opportunity to see things differently from a different perspective and open my eyes to areas that I just wasn't seeing because I was just in my little niche there, right? I had those barriers. So thank you so much, Tracy, Tracy, for sharing that. Now, if someone that is listening and viewing this wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, thank you. Yes, well, my website is tracy@tracysinclair.com. And there's information about me there and a contacts opportunity. And my email address is tracy@tracysinclair.com. So quite simple. I always love to hear from people, and yeah, would really love to engage with anyone in your community who wants to talk to me.
Absolutely. Folks, I'm going to have that as part of the video and show notes so that you can get a hold of Tracy. I'm also going to include the information of the book because I'm telling you, you'll want to support not only this project and that she has endeavored to write, but the information that she had mentioned is going to clear some of the whys behind the whole process. So thank you, Tracy, first of all, for being such a great professional. Congratulations on all the Marshall Goldsmith awards and accolades that you've been getting. I believe we first met when you were mentioned for the Mentor Award, and I love the fact that you are spearheading such a great endeavor. Folks, if you've enjoyed this episode and learn something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment right now. We're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast, we'd love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. Tracy, thank you so much for being with me today. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much. Me too. It's lovely to talk to you. And thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And folks, as we like to end this show, success to you.